Hey everybody, today's guest is Joseph Frankie III, Army veteran, executive coach, and founder of JF3 Associates. He has mentored over 700 leaders across 15 countries, helped CEOs get show ready, and transformed how professionals brand themselves on LinkedIn. Oh, and he was also just ranked number 14 on Thinkers 360's list of top 50 global thought leaders on careers for 2025. We're talking leadership, legacy, and LinkedIn, and the real power of storytelling through your experience. Let's get into it.
Hey, how are you today?
Hey, Nate, how's it going? Are you fit to fight?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Awesome. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Hey, great. I hope nobody's working a jackhammer on your sidewalks today.
Not at all. Not at all. It's a beautiful day outside. So we'll jump right in. And I'm going to start off with kind of taking you back a little bit and then forward a little bit. So commanding military units worldwide to executive coaching. Walk me through. Did you see when you were on the battlefield, did you see yourself getting here?
No, no. In fact, it took a blinding flash of the obvious to finally get here, because you just, it's innate to you. So you don't realize that you might have something valuable you can share. You just kind of grew up in the military, thinking, well, okay, this is the way the whole world works. And then once you get outside the military, you find out, wow, you've been born again into a completely new world with a new vocabulary, new standards, and just a different way about getting things done.
Now, prior to joining the military, did you have aspirations for the military? Or were there certain life events or current events or anything like that to kind of push that direction?
Well, I had aspirations to the military. My father was a bombardier, lead bombardier for the 91st Bomb Group in England during the war. He flew 32 missions over Germany in a B-17. And I think every, positive story about people and as a life example revolved around one of those 10-man crew, and I always thought, wow, if these guys could be so close and all that kind of stuff, this must be a great place to start out. So it really came to fruition when I went to Boys State, American Legion Boys State in Texas, and they had a cadet there on a cadet relationship, marketing program. And I got to talk to them and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of, said, I want to try this out. Anyway, so I got a letter about a month after I got back from Boy State saying, you ought to go through your congressman and consider, applying to the U.S. Military Academy. I said, well, my mother said, is this something you want to do? And I said, yes. And she said, I'll never forget. So she moved the typewriter to the kitchen table, and there it stood from July to May of the following year. Because, this was snail mail time,
yeah.
1969,
And those things, I'm old enough, but young enough to have used a typewriter when I was in elementary school for papers and stuff. Yeah, they weren't easy. They weren't easy to move around either.
No, it's a pretty hefty piece. You sure didn't want to drop it either.
What age were you when you had enlisted?
So I went into the military academy at 18. Left in the summer of 1970. So I graduated high school at the end of May. And by 1 July, I was reported into West Point. They have what they call new cadet barracks, or, their version of basic training. And that weeds a lot of people out, because if you're not there for yourself, you find out pretty quick.
I had a friend that joined after we graduated high school, and he went to the Army Ranger test, right. And he ended up home pretty quickly, and he realized he wasn't cut for that. So he went down off of the Ranger and back down to regular. So.
Well, it's got to be something you really want, because they'll certainly have got plenty of needles that you got to thread the eye through.
He enjoyed a great career, but he realized that wasn't the path he wanted exactly.
Well, and the sooner you know it, the better.
Exactly. Well, tell me a little bit about too, like, put me in your mindset when you're 18, 19 years old, and I'll connect with you on that. I think we talked a little bit about this on Discovery. I graduated in 2003. And for me personally, it was something that I had an opportunity with somebody that was a wrestling coach who was in the Naval Academy and things like that. But it was I have a lot of respect for you and for everybody else, because I was scared, and I didn't want to pursue it, because in that time we were in the middle of launching our war that spring, and it was a very scary time. And I really appreciate knowing the courage that goes through your head at 19 and 18 years old, where you decide to make that the path that you want to go through.
So when I went, Vietnam was still 100%. So 1970, it was full up. By the time I graduated in 1974, it had wound down a great deal, and we were, for the most part, out of Vietnam, I think, except for advisors and air support and that kind of thing. But the things that I learned, as an infantryman, I was commissioned in the infantry, and so did that for 14 years of my military service, both mechanized infantry, airborne infantry, air assault infantry, and special forces. And I decided after that, okay, I've done everything I can do in the field, and pretty much, you're going to be out of the field, mainly planning things and, organizing things. And so I had made a good reputation as a logistician, so I transferred out of the infantry into quartermaster, which is the logistics side of the Army, the supply side, and did that for 16 years.
And when and for that, for 16 years too, one last question about when kind of in your late teens in the beginning of it, did you envision such a long career as well, or did that kind of evolve as you were in the midst of it all?
That evolves when you're in the midst of it. One thing I did find that you don't have as much in the civilian world is the esprit de corps. I mean, you're with a unit, you're with people. I mean, you pull your weight, or the others ensure you pull your weight. And that camaraderie, and I always tell people that say, "Well, Joe, I think I'm getting out of the Army." I said, "Well, I mean, that's okay. I mean, it's whatever you want to do, but don't think that you're going to have the same camaraderie and esprit de corps that you have in the military in the private sector. Private sector is motivated by other things, in the military. If you're, down in what I call the ops side of everything, it's close with and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver. So, that's tough business, and you got to know who's on your left and right, and you got to depend on them.
And for kind of fast forwarding a little bit to current, I wanted to talk a little bit about your mentorship that you do. I mean, I saw some numbers when I was doing a little bit for the questions there. 13 different countries with mentor.
Yeah, I've worked in 15 different countries. Wow. helping people. I've never advertised. And the important thing about that is people find me. So I'm a big believer that you use a LinkedIn profile to basically brand yourself, and everything that you do, put on it. And people say, "Well, why do I have to put all that stuff on there?" I said, "Well, you don't have to." But it's easier for people to find me than me go out and find people. Right. And so ideally I'm to that stage now where I have, just about all I can handle with people finding me, so people call me up and say, "Hey, Joe, we have this new AI lead thing. It'll get you 5 people a week, all that kind of stuff." And I said, "Well, I can't handle what I got." So, and I'm not paying for it. I think my mine works, but it takes a little while to get there, right? You gotta work at it and do it. But LinkedIn, I think, is the most inexpensive branding marketing tool on the planet.
I completely agree. And I'm fascinated, anytime I interact with people that do international work, and I don't mean international travel, go on vacation. I mean international work where you have to understand the culture, you have to understand the person, you have to understand the history. Talk a little bit about the importance of that perspective, and then how does it relate to when you're working domestically as well as internationally?
Well, the beautiful thing is I work, one-on-one with people, and I've done that for 735 executives, veterans, and students. The youngest person I've worked with was 14 years old. They were seeking to get into a very elite private high school, very competitive. And the oldest person I worked with is 84, and he wanted back in the workforce, and we got him back in the workforce.
And then for your military experience, like a lot of times you see, how do you kind of correlate that to the executive experience, and then kind of using those two experiences to kind of enhance the mentorship?
Okay, so the military experience, this all came to me when I was doing executive search, right? A friend of mine called up and said, hey, we're opening an office for this big search firm. I want you to handle the engineering side of, and I said, sure, let's do it. So anyway, we opened up the office and we told them, I said, look, if you're opening up office in Houston, you got to be ready for a downturn. So if you don't have 2 years of gut, then, don't open the office. Oh, we got it. We're there and all that kind of stuff. So we did that. And what I learned was when you get into executive search is people know that you're doing it. You got all your friends and say, hey, can you got anything open that fits me? Hey, can you look at my resume? Can you help me there? Can you look at my LinkedIn profile? And so all the companies have policy. You don't talk to job seekers because, you will spend 24/7, doing that. Your job is to go find them clients, right? And now candidates are a different thing. A job seeker can become a candidate, but then he fits all the parameters of what you're seeking. So I told the guys, look, I'm a rule follower. I'll help you, before breakfast. I'll help you at lunch, and I'll help you after work. But company says this is the way we do things. So anyway, the first batch I helped, they all seemed to get interviews. They got what they wanted. So then they told their friends and family. So the phone was ringing at 5 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock at night, and saying, can you help me just like you helped John? And my wife comes in and says, hey, go back to your day job. And she said, or make a business out of this. And I said, well, why do you think it'd be a good business? He said, Joe, I'm listening to you talk to these guys, and you sound like you're developing officers in the Army.
Oh, wow.
So then it was like a blinding flash, right? Okay, then all I did for 34 years was help develop people, right? All kinds of people. Communications people, maintenance people, all these different verticals, exist in the Army just like the private sector. And the more senior you get, the more interaction you're doing. And so what you're doing all the time with your subordinates, the people that work under you, you're helping them get to their next assignment. You're helping them get to their next promotion. You're helping them get to their next school. And all those are competitive things. And by helping them, what you're doing is, okay, this person doesn't have any communications experience, so I'm going to make him the communications officer. So that's in his portfolio now, right? To make him a little bit stronger in that particular area. So all of that just kind of came to the forefront, and that's when I, formed JF3 Associates and just started doing that full time. Now, what I found is I do a combination of career development, branding, career transition. I do the executive search, still do it. I don't advertise. I just, people call me and say, hey, will you do this for me? And I will. In fact, I just finished 2 CEO searches this quarter. Regular consulting. I'm at that point in my life where, hey, Joe, you've seen this problem, and it's all on my profile. You can see what problems I've solved. I mean, it's populated. So they'll call up and I say, look, you've solved this problem way back when. Can you help me on this? I either can or I can't. If I can't, I refer them to somebody that I think can help. So that's kind of how we got to where we are today. That's a real thumbnail of it, but
no, that's perfect, and that's really helpful. And it's fascinating that your wife pointed that out and kind of and lit that flash for you.
Yeah, I mean, or I would have probably just, because I'm a mission oriented. In the Army, you're conditioned to finish the mission, right? So if you start the mission, you just go down this road. What I've learned in the private sector is that's not the case. Every once in a while, you get in a cul-de-sac. Okay, well, all that means is you can't go forward, but you got to back up, go left, go right, then try to go forward again.
That's a great I love that analogy. That's really good. In getting ready for talking to you, I have to say it's very evident of LinkedIn, and like you said, everything is in there. I try to be as transparent on mine as well, but yours is, I've done about 150 interviews for this podcast, and I've reached out to thousands of people. So I've read a lot of LinkedIn profiles, and yours by far is the densest, but also in the best way possible because of exactly what you said. And when people don't realize, you think about it from an SEO standpoint, from just a casual browsing standpoint. I mean, that's what it's there for, and that's the fact that it's utilized that way, and it's very impressive. And I want to lead into the book I caught when I was going through that. I caught your book, The 5-Minute Drill.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that and how that came about.
Lori Ruff and I wrote that book together, and the reason I think it's really good is, I'm not a woman. So I don't know the women's side of LinkedIn, but she is, and she's a subject matter expert. And so I kind of have what I call the military engineering side of LinkedIn, the guy side. And it's well received right now between men and women. So I think we did great. It's 4.9 out of 5.0 on Amazon. And so that's doing well. And it's even being used in high school business classes.
Well, that's actually what I was going to say. Was when I looked at it, it's something that I was in college right when Facebook came out, so social media was just in its infancy, and I jumped in full bore, created one of the first Facebook groups, immediately started seeing the benefits professionally of it, and then from there, obviously, same thing. I was one of the first ones on LinkedIn, completely got in there early. And it blows me away sometimes when I speak to people who are professionals and some are executives and are not on LinkedIn. Especially for me, it's in the alcohol space. We work with a lot of small business owners, a lot of independent liquor store owners, restaurant chains, and things like that. And you never find them on LinkedIn at all. And I'm always telling them, I'm like, guys, get yourself out there. Like really put yourself out.
Yeah, and you can brand stuff in there that you sell. I mean, I always tell people, they say, well, what's it like? And I said, look at LinkedIn from this standpoint. You're in a noun and verb war with whoever your competition is. The more nouns and verbs you have, the better. The higher the quality of the nouns and verbs, that's even better. The more compelling the nouns and verbs, that tops everything. So you have to be good at telling your story with qualitative and quantitative metrics. If you want me to tell you a quick story,
absolutely.
I use this a lot. A guy come to me, I know him for a long time, said, Joe, I'm in between gigs. Can you help me? And I'm a world-class project manager. Work with Fortune, 100 companies, and said, okay. And so let me take a look at your profile. So I get on there. I said, well, look, you won't ever come up in my search. And he said, what do you mean? You've known me forever. That's the problem. You're depending on me to know you. You got to let everybody in the planet know who you are. And so I went to his about section. I said, look, you say, hey, you're a world-class project manager, work for Fortune 100 companies. Okay. I'm an executive search guy. I see that blah, blah, all the time. I said, if you want to sell yourself, and believe me, in the first 3 sentences of the about section, if you cannot sell your production, what you produce, next guy, Next step, you know. And I said, what you need here is, hey, I'm a world-class project manager. I'm certified in this. In the last 10 years, I've worked 7 projects with project teams of 3 people to 27 people, with projects valued at 1.3 million to 237 million. They all came in on time and under budget. Okay, now I'm going to read that guy's entire profile, because he just showed me he could measure his production, and so that helps us, the executive search people, go straight to the deal. Because when I first got in this business, the search was, okay, it might be a 6 to 8 week period, right? Hey, now we're looking at 18 days.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If you're not show ready, I'm not calling you and saying, hey, Nate, have you done this? I think you kind of have, and then we got to work at trying to get it on your resume and this and that and the other. I mean, today you got to be show ready 24/7, no matter who you are. And I say that because during COVID, my business tripled in the space of about 6 weeks, because everybody that thought that they were going to just, ride their company all the way in, and there's nothing wrong with that, and some good companies could absorb that. But a lot of people were calling me and say, hey, I got 2 months severance, I got a house payment, 3 kids, what am I going to do? And basically we don't have a LinkedIn profile. Mm-hmm. And so my point is, you don't know what the future is. So I think you got to be show ready, whoever you are, wherever you are, 24/7, 365.
Yeah, for me, it's like even being an early adopter on it. I mean, I used it, but I didn't use it to the extent of like exactly the scenario you just said. In April 2017, I got laid off from a job, and I was the vice president of a $52 million distributor. And I was a very humble person, though, at the same time, and I was also embarrassed. And it was one of those things where I was afraid to go out and be public about where I was in the position and stuff like that, and all those other things. And it was interesting that you say about how you write things, because I had a very humble profile on LinkedIn. And then after a while, I was like, you know what? I don't owe anything to anybody. I need to show what I was doing. And then I put managed $47 million in sales to $54 million in sales, added. Then as soon as the metrics came in, exactly like you said, the reciprocal came back, because my profile was no longer a 2-dimensional resume. It was a dynamic story. Right.
But also selling your emotional intelligence along with your IQ. And so one thing that a resume doesn't do, it doesn't sell your emotional intelligence. So LinkedIn is like an oil portrait. Okay. A resume is a black and white snapshot taken with a camera. So every once in a while, you can go out to your oil portrait, and you can make it naturalistic. You can make it romantic. You can make it, whatever. I mean, your twist on it. That's the emotional side of it. And so you put the color in it and everything else. And so LinkedIn, when we first got on it, hey, it's your name and your first job or whatever you listed, right?
Some people just uploaded the PDF of their resume. I think I might have done that at the beginning.
That's okay. I mean, the resume has words on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's okay. That's a great place to start. But the point being is, like, I think LinkedIn issues you a bleach skeleton of yourself, right? Here. So here's my head. This is my name and this is my job. And then you got all these other bones, and it's your job to go put muscle, tendons, and ligaments all over that skeleton. And what you have is a lot of people use LinkedIn like the Wall Street Journal. I'm only going to use above the fold of the first page, right? Well, LinkedIn gives you below the fold, pages 1 through 15, op-ed section, finance section, all that stuff. And so, and I'll go back to a quote. I want to make sure, you said, I'm humble. I don't, I didn't know what I wanted to get out there. And, it's what Dizzy Dean says, it ain't bragging if you done it.
And that's exactly what somebody told me. It's so weird you just said that, because that was the same phrase that I was given.
So Dizzy Dean, he and his brother Paul, they were like the Muhammad Ali for the sports writers in the 30s, right, in the radio. So and he used bad English, like it ain't it ain't bragging if you done it, right? So he's the bane of English teachers. But his whole point was, he said that he and his brother were going to win 45 games. They were both pitchers combined, and that was like unheard of, and everybody thought he's just a blowhard. Well, guess what? He did over 30 and his brother did around 16 or 17, but they combined, they did over 45. And they said, well, what do you think about bragging about that? It's, well, there's no bragging to this. I mean, this is a fact. There's undisputable. And so that's why metrics are so critical. I mean, they separate you from all the other people. Say, well, I've been there and done that. Well, I've been there and done that measured by these metrics.
Hey creators, founders, and dreamers, the FreeMind Network is brought to you by Cowabunga Johnny, where nostalgia meets creativity. Cowabunga Johnny creates custom cards that are perfect for personal keepsakes, team recognition, or even promotional items. These cards pop with personality and make an unforgettable impact. But that's not all. Cowabunga Johnny also crafts larger-than-life murals and nostalgic pop culture-inspired art. It's about connecting with your audience through bold, memorable visuals. Want to learn more? Visit cowabungajohnny.com and see how he's turning memories into art that connects. Let's create something amazing together.
And that's, I think for me, it was like that as well, because I think a lot of people had seen, I document my life very transparently. And, but I think the metrics was so crucial because people would see me going around the country at breweries and things like that. And they were like, oh, he's got a life like that. And then when I put the money down and being like, this is what my client, my employer, and all these people were getting, then all of a sudden it was like, okay, he knows what he's doing at scale. And I think that to complement what you're saying, I mean, that's exactly it was it was getting past the ego and realizing it wasn't some humble thing. It was like, this is your story. You've earned that. And just because it's on your resume, you also should be using it to show other people that, because at the end of the day, it actually helps a lot of people, because if they look at you a certain way and then all of a sudden they see that, it's not necessarily a validation as much as it is, I enjoy when people's perception immediately gets changed and they have the wrong perception of me in certain ways. So that's always fun to, like, especially the certain people I had reached out to. And then when I changed it, then all of a sudden they were replying. I was like, all right, there we go.
I worked for this one gentleman. We worked working on his LinkedIn profile, and he finally got it all done. He said, well, Joe, I'm just not going to put any of this out there. And I said, hey, this is a very personal thing. It's your call. And I said, put this stuff in a folder. And he said, and let's print it up. And he said, well, why would I want to do that? I'm not going to use it. And I said, well, you need to give it to your wife and mark it obituary. Because if we're not going to use it for you, we might as well make it easier on your wife to say what you should have and could have.
I love that. That's great.
Think about it. You're here. You might as well do it.
You're exactly right. I think that's fantastic. I like that a lot. Let's talk a little bit about, I'm fascinated because you cover so many different age demographics, and something that we cover a lot in here, but you have a very unique perspective because of the global influences you've had in your life, understanding so many different cultures. And then you add in the diversity of ages that you work with. What's like a common mindset? And it doesn't have to be one specific thing, but what are some common mindset you see in successful people? And I don't mean successful in the way of like they made it to the top of the corporate ladder. I just mean success in the sense of they're happy, they're content, they're good with where they're going. And then the next part I'll ask about success in the professional aspect.
A life is a football game, right? So the first half is all about success. In other words, you're out there, you get married, you got 1.7 children, and now you've got to pay for the house, you got to feed everybody, you got to prepare for their college or whatever you're preparing for. So I mean, you're just out there, hacking and chopping, right? So most people reach a stage at some point where that stuff, they're starting to go away, all that kind of stuff, and you still got this bandwidth out there, and that's what I call halftime. Halftime, you go in the locker room and say, okay, what's changed here? Well, I don't have the same team. I had on the first half, I got the second half, and this is my team, my spouse plus, whatever I want to do. And so that second half is about significance. And so everybody, depending on where they're at, are in a different stage, and so the most important thing, I think, is people want me to come like to an auditorium and like teach them about LinkedIn, and I refuse to do it. And they say, well, look, I mean, is it the money? I said, no. I said, $25,000 for a two-hour talk is not bad. But why won't you do it, John? And I said, because unless we're going to separate that room into LinkedIn 101, 201, 301, 401, 501, 601, because I coach at whatever level the person's at. So that's why I just think putting any kind of group together, on LinkedIn. And then secondly, if you're going to help somebody with LinkedIn, I got to hear what they want, not what I want. Because we're there, at least I'm there, trying to help them to get what they want. And one of the reasons I stay in the search business is I got to know what the market's doing. And if you're out here, fighting and shoving and pushing, trying to find people, how the market's reacting, whether it's hot, slow, and all that kind of stuff. And so that all goes into the coaching of helping them get what they want. Because I can tell you, I haven't had one person that said exactly the same thing. It's very individual. Like the young lady, she wanted to get into this private high school, right? And so what we did is use the LinkedIn format to merchandise her. And one of the things that came back, from her little interview, they said they only asked her 3 questions. And I said, oh my God, this is not good. And he said, Mr. Frankie, they told me I was already ready for college. So she's 14 years old. So what is the school telling her? The school is telling her they already know that she can merchandise herself when she graduates. So that means they're not going to have any problem. She's not going to be a statistic that didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
You see where I'm going? Because schools care about producing, and the way you produce is don't take on anything that is not going to produce.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's wild. It's interesting too. Like you mentioned about emotional intelligence, and I want to kind of go back to like talking about for other people who aren't on LinkedIn as well. While this isn't sponsored by LinkedIn and people will think that, but it's not by any means.
No.
I want more people to be on LinkedIn, but I also want people to understand that the one part about LinkedIn that's gotten fascinating the past few years has been bringing that emotional intelligence into LinkedIn and people being more vulnerable about their person. Like you used to never see, a husband and wife put their photos from the Caribbean cruise on LinkedIn, but you might see that more often now, coupled with lessons and quotes and things like that. So it's interesting to see people bring their personal life more interwoven, and hopefully it's a reflection of the broader scope of our society, and as far as that goes.
I think so. So the important thing about LinkedIn is you have all these other sections, the volunteer section, your honors and awards section, you name it, and they'll come up with a new one down the road. But the point is you got multiple places to tell a story. And LinkedIn, as far as I'm concerned, is a storytelling tool. And you tell story. And people say, well, why am I going to be on LinkedIn and what stories are important? I said, you tell story after story after story that you solve problems. There's no other reason why people are just not looking for, your pretty face and your beard, to connect with. They're putting 6 or 7 search words up there because they're looking for something. And so the question is, do you come up in the search? To go quickly back to your emotional intelligence, and the reason I say it's important, I found out years ago, kind of by accident. I had the CEO call me up one time and said, hey, Joe, I want you to consider, I want to talk to you about this. Okay. And I said, well, how did you find me? And he said, well, you're a blood donor. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, in the volunteer section, I have that I donate blood. And I said, how's this relevant to this conversation? He said, well, I have a daughter that requires frequent blood transfusions, and I'm determined that anytime I can do business with blood donor, then I'm going to do that because, I'm dependent on y'all, for my daughter's, continued livelihood.
And that's, for me, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. And so the same thing that I want to say that's really important. I've made more money off my high school entry on LinkedIn than any other entry.
Now, which one's that? I missed that when I was looking through.
High school.
Yeah.
So in your education, you go all the way down to your high school, and somebody will call me up and say, hey, Joe, I was offensive center in high school. Hey, Joe, I got my diving certification when I was high school. Hey, Joe, I learned how to fly when, I was in high school. So my point is, whether you like it or not, your high school seems to be a ice-breaking gizmo.
It's now you're going to make, I didn't put any sports related things in mind, and now I'm going to change it this afternoon.
Every sport I did, all the competitive poetry interpretation, speech stuff, everything. In fact, I ran out of room and I had to create 3 others. And I'll tell you why this was important. I was consulting one time and I was asking all these questions about food service. So this guy runs over to the computer and he types in there and he says, Joe, I've been through your LinkedIn profile and you're spending all this time talking to us about food service and, our slides here, but you don't have any experience in food service. And I go, oh gosh. He said, you're right. It's not on my profile. I said, I grew up in a family restaurant. I said, my grandmother was a taskmaster and she knew how to run a kitchen. She knew how to organize it. And the state would bring people in, other restaurateurs, to show them how we wash dishes, which wasn't by a machine, but, there were sinks and, certain hot water things and all that stuff. So my point is I knew how to organize, serve people, run the cash register, because, we had family businesses. And so what I learned from that is every time somebody asked me a question where I've told a story, I'd say, is that on my LinkedIn profile? And if not, I go back and put it on there.
It's, it makes sense as to why you naturally went into logistics and operations in the military.
Well, every time I was in charge of a unit, I was always made myself the mess officer, and we won Thanksgiving or Christmas that year for that mess facility in a competition.
It also makes sense for a lot of other things because working in the food business and everything like that, it's a lot of situational management. It's a lot of wearing different hats. It's a lot of nobody's higher than anybody else because at the end of the day, the trash has got to go out no matter what. The mop's got to go moving. And I definitely mix. Your story makes a lot of sense. I didn't, once you said the family business there now. So,
well, because that was like from the 5th grade to the 12th grade. But when I was in 5th grade, I could work the cash register in the restaurant. Yep. And my aunt and uncle had a service station, and I could work the cash register in the service station and sell bus tickets, and that kind of stuff because the bus stopped in our town, and that's where people got on and off the bus.
Nice. What when you're coaching and you're coaching veterans and then executives, or is there a different strategy for each as far as coaching, or is every strategy individual to every person, I guess is what I would put.
Everything's individual. What I would say is the bulk of my clients, 2 standard deviations around the mean. So the big part of the hump in the normal curve is 40 plus year olds trying to figure out what's next. Because at 40, nobody's chasing you anymore. And as you go to 45 and on, it's less of a chase. So you have to merchandise yourself to the max so that you can be found. Because what you offer the world is the ability to work with a team of people and solve a problem. Because if it's just a technical skill, they're going to pay the 30-year-old less money to do it, right? But when you want problem solved, that usually involves groups or, more than one person and might be in more than one place too. So there's a leadership ability to be able to do that. So what I do is I listen to the person. Most people are going to tell you exactly where they are. And I said, what is it you want to achieve? Where do you want to go? And what we do is based on that, that's how we craft and build a LinkedIn bridge to get them from where they are to where they want to go. Because people will say, well, why do I need to do that? And I said, well, right now you're out here fishing with filet mignon. You think you're going to catch a trout. And what you don't understand is if you know you want the trout, you got to give the bait that the trout like.
That's a good one. What do you think? What's for you? What stands out as you sit back? I'm sure you seem like the type that does a lot of reflecting in a positive way. What do you look back at like one of the most rewarding moments of your career as a coach and mentor?
Just watching people. I worked with one guy one time. I won't say he was desperate, but he was extremely motivated. And I said, look, to work on a LinkedIn profile, as we go through this process, this is like writing a term paper on yourself, right? When you think about it, you're telling your stories and there's a lot of them, right? And it needs the same organization that, okay, I'm going to do the outline. Here's my research. Oh, I got to go find my metrics on that. I got to find my metric. So that's what I call it's a marathon. You got to get into a pace and just do it. And then there's 2 or 3 things with LinkedIn based on who I'm talking to. Usually, hey, this is stuff you can do in a couple of hours and it's going to make a difference. But the rest of it, the noun and verb war, that's story after story after story that you solve problems. And, by the way, I always find people and I say, okay, you don't have any honors and awards around here. So you are the most average human being I've ever met. Oh, well, I did this and I did that. And I was an NCAA 1 athlete. And I said, no, you weren't. And they said, well, yeah, I am. And I said, if it's not on your LinkedIn profile, you never, ever, ever in your life did it. Period.
It's one of those things that was always frustrating when I would be applying for jobs though, where you put it all out there and then you go through the interview process and then when you finally advance through, that person has no idea anything of your history and you're like, it was all smooth sailing for those that were like in tune with social media.
Yeah.
So, retell it. Yeah.
The other thing I've found, if you have a good, well-organized LinkedIn profile, most people are lazy. They'll take your LinkedIn profile and interview you based on that.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah, there's a lot of the questions are geared towards.
So what happens is the answers you give are really good, and they're backed up on public social media with your recommendations from really good world-class people. So what you can do for yourself. Think of it, and here's another kind of analogy. I'm a search person. I do executive search and whatever. So think about it. I'm the laziest person on the planet. Myself and the HR department. So if you do every piece of work that I need to do as a search person, and you give it to me in a beautiful box wrapped up in great paper with the prettiest bow you've ever seen, you go to the front of the pile. Because I don't have to do anything with you. You've already sold yourself. I don't have to get on the phone. If I think you're the best candidate in the world, we're doing a redo on your LinkedIn profile and a resume, because anything on your resume has to be backed up on your LinkedIn profile. Doesn't have to be everything on your LinkedIn profile doesn't have to be on your resume, but your resume is a subset of your LinkedIn profile. And a resume is written once, for a particular job description. There's no general resume. That's your LinkedIn profile. People say, well, Joe, we want you to work on this project, and, hey, can you send us a 2-page resume? And I said, look, everything you want to know about me is on the profile. And he said, well, we really need a 2-page resume. I said, well, send me a retainer of $500 and I'll get somebody to write you a 2-page resume.
When you first started this out, what was the balance like of, let me try to figure out how to word this. I want to say like being empathetic to people in certain situations. Now, as an executive search, sometimes you're going to get people that want to change their jobs and go lateral, go upwards, and it's a positive momentum. But you also mentioned job seekers and things like that. So you've also had experience with people that might have been laid off and or lost. Talk to me about the balance of empathy and accountability and how you mentor people as they move forward in their lives.
The key thing about helping somebody, I can tell you right now, Nate, it will be easier for you to help me on something, okay, than it is for you to help yourself on the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah.
Because when you're trying to do it to yourself, you're going to go through all these psychological filters, like, oh, I'm not good enough to put that down there, or all that kind of stuff. So part of this methodology I've learned over time is I've got to get their subconscious off to the left or right, whatever you want to call it, so that we kind of leave that there and I can work and then come back in and, let them help themselves. So there's a lot of, your subconscious has a lot to do with how you're going to do it. And people say, well, you're a coach. Why do you say that? And I said, well, because I get people to help me sometimes, because, I'm just a human being and I've got my own, subconscious I got to work through too.
And I think that's a lot of times too, people look at a consultant, like a consultant would come in and kind of, or a coach would come in. A coach's job is to curate that person, really light that fire up, get that fire that's inside that person, and then really let it grow and send it off, as opposed to like a manager or a consultant whose job is kind of to show you, but not necessarily help you do it, but just show you how to do it. So there's a defining factor, and I really appreciate the coaching part of things, because I'm a big fan of accountability. I don't know if we had talked about this in the discovery meeting before, but I quit after 20 years of working in the alcohol industry. I quit drinking 2 years ago. And it's a big thing for me, where I'm also someone that is of the older libertarian, which is the freedom to be free as long as your freedoms do not infringe on others.
Yeah.
So with that, I still work in the alcohol industry, and we're launching a brand and everything like that, because I'm not a teetotaler person that because I got sober means the world has to be sober. What I'm trying to get at is that's an accountability. And that's a big piece of my everyday life that I think a lot of times we as a society project our issues onto other people. And I think it convolutes things when we're coaching and mentoring. And when I want to say about the coaching is, when you're being coached, you're being held accountable for all of your actions throughout. And I think that the strength in our society will be accountability for everybody. And that is the self-accountability more than what I'm saying, which is what some people assume is we go out and just talk about other people and hold other people accountable. I'm talking about everybody being more introspective and doing what you're exactly saying is, when you get that job, that coach helped you get there, but it's not your credibility, and your merit is yours.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times the biggest challenge I find is people do not know how to merchandise themselves. Okay, and you picked up on it. You discovered it on your own. Once you got the metrics in there, it was like it's like you turned a page and it was different.
Mm-hmm.
And because what you did is you made it easier for the people to find you. And so, I look at a LinkedIn profile when I'm doing an executive search, maybe 10 seconds, 12 seconds. And, you're either going to be looked at for another 45 seconds or not. In that 45 seconds, you'll earn maybe the full read of your profile. So it's very important. I mean, if you want things to happen for yourself, you have to set yourself for success, because the old way, think about it, you go back years and years, you are where you are, and the only job you're going to get is within commuting distance, right? So basically everybody kind of knows you as an entity. They might even know you as a family. But now today, I mean, you might be working a problem in Europe, from where you're at, right there, because you have deliverables you owe, and you coordinate with other people and all of that kind of stuff. And keeping track of your metrics, that's what I always tell people, because once you shift your job, you don't have access to those files anymore. So I always tell people, I said, look, weekly, when I was teaching my son when he went to work, I said, every week, make a summary of the things you did and the things you want to know. 5 things you did, and 3 things you want to know. And at the end of the month, maybe you write a little short story on that. And when he went into the president to talk to him, he was, you know, a young intern. And the president said, I've never had anybody do that before. You know what you want to learn. And the next thing you know, they gave him more responsibility. Took him off the jackhammer. Took him off the jackhammer, and he gradually, as he was in college, he just his color helmets, changed, and it got more responsibility. He could just walk on, when he got home from college, he could walk on a site with his helmet and, clock in.
That's I like that. The five things you did and 5 things you want to learn. That's over the course of a year. That's a book right there.
Yeah. And, and I said, when you go to these meetings where they're trying to say, okay, this is how you did, what are we going to do in the future? I said, you want to have some say-so in your future.
Yeah.
Okay. But in order to have some say-so, you got to be organized and prepared.
Yeah.
And I said, hand him a 1-page thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you, as far as like moving forward, leadership and the definition of it is very gray and liquid right now. And the reason I'm saying that is we have AI, we have remote work, we have rapid transformation going on. What are some of the core features that you think will be, no matter what changes technologically or anything like that, these are still going to always be core leadership principles?
I'd say my greatest success in life came from my grandfather, who instilled in me that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. And if you're not listening a minimum of twice as much as you're talking, you're not learning. So I would think as more complicated technically it gets and more things that get solved, the quality of your ear for listening has got to be even more attuned, right? Because everybody's not going to be in the office. Some of the people will be in the office. Some people will be wherever they are, but they all need to be heard. And how that's going to be done is probably going to be unique to the work environment that you're working in and what you choose to create, and culturally what's based on the people you're working with. Not everybody might be American on this team. You might have 2 Dutch people and a person in England and, 6 people over here.
I have 2 more questions for you. I'll be finished on time. Don't worry. When you're at the age of a business, let's say right now, we're looking at in the small business Main Street America, we're looking on in the next few years a massive amount of small business owners that their children didn't want to take over their business, and some of these businesses are going to kind of fall apart and shutter unless they're acquired. Me personally, I look at that as a real issue of institutional knowledge that could be lost, of business ownership, entrepreneurship, whatever that facet may be. What are some of the ways that businesses and people can get that institutional knowledge out to a place so that other generations can benefit from it?
It's funny you should ask that, because years ago we tried to do this in the utilities. And it was called the Knowledge Keeper, but it was how to bank the operational knowledge of subject matter experts on assets. In other words, you can have knowledge, right? But what you're wanting is this person's knowledge on this particular substation or this particular valve station in a water plant, right? Because there's 12 valves there. Well, when you go in there and say, well, how do you stop flow here? And well, we got to wait for Bob. Bob, you don't have a manual that anybody can understand.
Bob's smoking a cigarette outside. We got 20 minutes before he's coming in.
So my point is, with video, you could film or, take this video of this person. Okay, here's how you start flow operations. Here's how you maintain flow operations, separate video. Here's how you stop flow operations. Here's how you do an emergency shut-off. So he might be showing that to an apprentice, but the idea was to film it or video it so that if another apprentice needed to see it, he could do it on his phone. Instead of him starting all over 12 times during the week, spending that same 40 minutes going through the same thing, whereas this person could get that and they might have 3 questions, right? So in that system, he could pose a question to the guy that populated the knowledge, and it all had fingerprints of who populated the knowledge, who approved the knowledge, any updates, all the checks and balances you wanted. So what you're asking is the future of all of this institutional knowledge, I think can be transferred if the businesses are acquired as opposed to shuttered. And I see that because I'm on a board right now where we're trying to acquire businesses, and this guy doesn't want to be acquired, but he makes the only special circuit thing. He has a people that know how to do it, all the stuff, but he's not interested in like letting it go. He just wants to close it down, and nobody could I don't see the logic in that, but hey, it's a free country.
It is, and it's really unfortunate. It's in my line of work, I deal with a lot of family-owned businesses and a lot that are second or third generation, some that are first. And it's always fascinating, and to me, when the younger generation, or a couple of different ways. Third is they never had children at all, and then but the other one is interesting to see. Some children how those children completely reject it and run away from it, and then some children that embrace it and make it a true, authentic passion, and then some children that just see the opportunity to ride the curtails and not have to work very hard. So I always find it interesting. But what scares me, I really am serious though, and what scares me is that we have a lot of business owners and foundational business owners that can teach us so much, and leaders. And as approaching retirement and things like that, I fear that there is a lot of really institutional small businesses, and whether it's a corner diner or a tourist attraction, or even just like you said, a very niche, service or production facility that could go away, and somebody else will create it and not do it as well, and not have the integrity maybe that the other one did.
Well, I mean, take my example. So Frankie's restaurant was created in 1928. And so my grandparents started it. My grandmother was the chef or cook. And it was turned over kind of to my aunt and her daughter, and then turned over to my dad and mom. And then my sister, with the family restaurant business, we closed half a day on Christmas, whether we needed to or not.
You got to get the presents in.
So my point is, at 5 o'clock in the morning, because it was a agricultural community, to 8 o'clock at night, and it's not like in kind of the Bible Belt, so you're not making the money off of alcohol. I mean, you're really making the money off of food and maybe a little bit of beer. But, I looked at, I got the appointment to the military academy. So even the Army has a holiday.
Exactly. There's a different line. That's what I mean. There's a lot of people look at it. It's not cut and dry. That's why I gave it 4 different roads on that path, Yeah. So with my last question, this year I did a new thing, and I'm really fascinated by the answers, and I'm going to be building a Spotify playlist, and it's for what 3 songs would you want played at your funeral?
The Yellow Rose of Texas, nice. The Ballad of the Green Beret, and the Air Force fight song. I heard my dad sing that in the shower, forever. Off we go into the wild blue yonder.
Very nice. Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time today. I want to remind everybody there was no prep in advance or anything like that. This is a genuine conversation between 2 strangers, and I look forward to many more conversations with you. I really appreciate it.
Hey, listen, I love this drive-by shooting format.
That might be the best description of it.
Hey, if we're not having fun, why do it?
That is awesome. That was it. It's I try to tell you, but you'd believe me. this is really the way I live my life. Like I get to, like I'll get to know somebody at a coffee shop while we're waiting in line if we have a 20-minute wait for that espresso. So it's my life is a drive-by.
Same here. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way it was been done for eons.
Absolutely. Well, hey, you enjoy the rest of your day. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nate. You got a great format, and thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure.
I appreciate your candor too. And I not enough people joke around on here. So you got me on that one. That was good. I like that. You enjoy the rest of your day, Joseph.
Hey, I'm a survivor.
You got it, boss. Take care, man.
See ya.